Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Pfeiffer, and this is Conversations on Retail. We're so excited to have as our guest again, Rick West, the co-founder of Field Agent, co-founder and CEO of Field Agent. And Rick, before we get started, first of all, thank you so much. I always appreciate you making the time to do this, and I always look forward to you being with us because you've just got so much, so many great insights to share with us. Congratulations! I want to start by congratulating you and your team on what, at least from here, seems to be a very successful launch of the Plum marketplace. I'd love for you to maybe spend a few minutes kind of talking about that before we dig into today's topic.
Yeah, it's Matt. It's coming from my world again. I'm a old Procter guy from many years ago, like almost 17 years there. And every now and then in the corporate world, you get to birth something, right? It's few and far between. But again, I've been an entrepreneur for 20, and we've had startups. And obviously, we did the startup with Field Agent, and with the Plum marketplace, it has almost felt like we've had a brand new startup, which has been really, really fun for our team because, again, if you join Field Agent today at year 12, you don't have the same vibe and feel than, day one, month one, year two. So it's been really cool for our team. And we continue to get great feedback from our, clients and people that are engaging that it's great now if you have problems at retail, that you can actually have an Amazon type of experience when you need to purchase a solution or a product to help you win at retail. So great feedback. We'd love to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. And I'll shamelessly not plug, but weave in a product or two on how the Plum marketplace can help people engage with their buyers as we talk through this. But it's been a really exciting time for our team. So thanks for asking.
Yeah. Well, I'm your biggest fan, and it really is one of those things. You spend some time on the platform. You're like, why hasn't someone done this sooner? Because it really is. It really is a game changer. So one of the resources that you'll find on Plum when you go to plumshop.com is a blog section, and in that blog section, you've got what's called the buyer meeting success kit. So what we're going to talk about today is acing your next buyer meeting, but it's really based on this from, again, all 28 pages I read through. It really is an ambitious sort of research project. It's not just based on one person's experience. You're pulling in a lot of expertise from the supplier community, people that have spent their careers, pitching and representing products to Walmart and Target and lots of other retailers. So kind of talk about the process that went into building out this research.
Yeah. So if you're watching this or listening to this now, if you work for corporate America, none of you should be surprised to realize that you look left or right and say, so-and-so shall be named, but they shall remain nameless. I mean, without legal approval and 10 other things, it's hard to get someone from the corporate world to kind of speak specifically about a story or relationship that they have from a buying perspective, or even corporately to allow someone to speak. So we did our due diligence, did a ton of interviews with folks. There's some great quotes in there, but we talked to people just like the folks listening here and really try to do a cross section between the verticals they sell into, experience levels, large companies, small, and have a pretty thorough synopsis of what success looks like. Now, what you and I'll do today, at least what I'll do, is that coming from P&G, I didn't really sell in the US per se, but when I was in Asia, I carried the bag, did some selling, sold to some really tough folks from the UK that were in Bangkok, Thailand, Singapore, tough guys there, tough people. And then my first 10 years here back in the States, carried the bag into Walmart, going through. So I have experience. Now, I don't want anyone to think when you're listening to Rick speak over the next, 20, 30 minutes that I can tell you what's going on this week or this past month at Walmart or at Target or anywhere else. But the ebook that we have has tried and true legacy types of principles that I'll add some great flavor to, because I can tell you some stories that we couldn't necessarily print, but I'll also be able to get some perspective to that, because I think it's tried and true as you think of it from a buying, selling, interaction standpoint. So excited to talk more about that.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a high stakes game. And with so many changes in retail, and the shopper has become so much more sophisticated. It has so many more options It's becoming all the more important to nail these meetings. And one of the things that really come through to me early in this document, much like championships are won during the off season,
right,
so much of your success is based on the preparation that you're doing ahead of time. So kind of talk about that prep that goes into even before you get the meeting.
Yeah, we had a great quote from one of the folks being interviewed. He said, listen, it's easy to think your local store is like all the others, but really you need to understand a category is a good cross section of stores. And that's so true. If you're listening in from Boston or LA, or you're from a larger metropolitan area, and you think that represents Target or Walmart, you're just naive to say the least. When you look at the thousands of stores that are across rural America, across the flyover states. So the homework part of it, and we'll get into data later, Matt, as we talk through this, but the homework piece is, are you truly a student of the store? Because I'm telling you, even in today's world, your buyers get out into stores more than you think. And they have data at their fingertips that while it may not be as qualitative and storytelling as you'd like, they have pieces of data in front of them. So what I found, which is always kind of interesting, is that when you come in and you've done your homework from a shopping perspective and a store perspective, it's always good to kind of weave in, I was in some stores looking here, and here's some common things that I'm seeing. And then I went to a competitor store, looked at the same way, and we really started to focus on this specific trait. Being an expert in that really adds value. If nothing else, Matt, just helps the buyer understand that you're not calling their bluff. You really actually know what you're talking about. Now, we could jump from there and jump right into math, because we all know that most of these calls these days are tied to math. But I was told a long time ago, and it's true today, you never ask a question you don't answer to. And you definitely don't want to ask a question that you should know the answer to. So the last thing we want to do is to walk into any buyer meeting, and most of the folks on the call know this, and say, so how do you think my sales are doing, and what do you think? And that's the last question, Matt, any of us need to ask. And then obviously we get into the units per store per week and all the great, scorecards and things are in front of us. But at the end of the day, understanding stores, doing your homework to understand, especially within the right traits and verticals, what's going on, really know how your business is doing, and being able to look at your scorecard and make sure that you've got a great fundamental scorecard set up, I would argue are table stakes. That if you don't have that and have a good handle on that, you're like the person that shows up at Shark Tank and Mark Cuban makes them look stupid. I mean, it is the worst place to be. So all that being said, foundation's important.
You talk about fundamentals, maybe no more fundamental question than this. What is the role of the supplier in that meeting?
Yeah, and again, it depends on your category and the buyer, but no surprise to anyone, Matt, that your buyer's not sitting there and says, well, I'm glad you're here because I only have one category and two suppliers, so I've got all kinds of time to understand. We know with the pressures at Walmart and other retailers that buyers are asked to do more. Buyers are getting more categories, more SKUs, and with all this issue of items being out of stock and trying to bring new people in, we know that role expectation of the supplier is that at a minimum, you have to be an expert within your product category, and primarily you should really understand the industry. And I've been in enough of these calls that it starts out, pretty business matter of fact. And once you get through the first couple of hurdles, especially if you've got a relationship, they're saying, all right, whether we've got a 20-minute call or a 45-minute call, during our time, educate me, the buyer. Tell me what's going on, because you want that buyer to need your expertise to the point that if you do this right, I would argue you'd be the first call on the favorite speed dial when I've got an issue A or B. I just literally, before I walked in today, had a supplier send me a text message saying, hey, had a question, buyer's asking for this. My person's out of the office right now that would normally work with your team. I know you guys can answer this question for me, can get out in stores. Can someone call me today? Now, that wasn't a fun call for that person to make, but we know, Matt, that came from a buyer that needed help. That person is on the short list, and either that person knows the answer or can find the answer. Can you imagine getting that phone call saying, I don't know, or I don't know what to do? So field agent, Plum Marketplace obviously plays a role in that because he knew we were on his short list, but there's nothing cooler from the relationship standpoint to be on the buyer's favorite, the buyer's list. Now, you would also argue that it's like your worst nightmare because you get that phone call at 10 o'clock at night. But really, at the end of the day, all of your competitors want to get that phone call. So we would argue that you need to be an expert there. And then at the end of the day, Walmart knows their consumers better than anyone. But Matt, with the research that we've done and the engagement we've had with suppliers time and time again, and we all understand this anecdotally, that everyone's got an opinion. Everyone thinks they know what's going on, but I've yet to meet a buyer that doesn't listen when you say, I've talked to a couple of hundred of your shoppers. Here's what your shoppers are saying. It reminds me of that, the analogy back in the day. I played football back in the day, and I can remember my mom saying, it was always so sweet when I would go to the sideline and the coach would put his arm around me and he would just talk to me on the sideline. Now, if my mom's listening now, she'll say she knows the truth. The truth was he was gripping my ribs and he was squeezing the skin. And he was saying, I think I know what you did. Don't lie to me because the magic sky and the eye don't lie. And so we're going to review this film tomorrow morning in my basement. Don't lie to me now. So it wasn't as sweet. I think that buyer relationship at times is the same way. Is that, okay, I know what you're telling me, but if you lead me down the wrong path and I find it's wrong, that's a bad thing. And then you're saying, no, sir, coach, I'm telling you, this is what happened. You can show it on film tomorrow. If you can get into that kind of relationship where your buyer's pushing, and not only are they listening to what you're telling you, but they're making some decisions, and you don't have to be a category captain to do this, but it really is being able to understand the consumer well enough that you're on that short list from a buyer standpoint. And that's been really cool to see.
Yeah. And I think there's an area where there might be a little bit of a misconception. And for a lot of reasons, the reality is the buyers rely upon their suppliers to know more about the category than they will ever know themselves. Mm-hmm. So talk about kind of, data to support these insights that you're bringing, because that's ultimately how you're going to win your buyer over, is not with, what you've observed and what you believe, but it's what you can prove.
Yeah, I can remember one such instance, it was that classic, we're saying, here's what the industry is looking like. Here's the category. And Matt, the buyer looks at you and says, tell me something I don't already know. And you're like, ooh, listen, they've got Nielsen IRI data, they purchase, they've got all the big numbers. Tell me something I don't know. And I remember, my business partner, Henry Ho, one of his great quotes is like, man, when you enter into that buyer engagement, whether it's on a Zoom call or you're sitting across the table, you need to take your buyer a gift of data and insight. They are hungry for those objectives. And it doesn't matter whether you're a large provider that has all kinds of data, or you're small and use someone like Plum, someone like Field Agent to capture data for you. You can walk in with a really unique engagement and piece of data that, if it's positioned right and laid out right, whether it's a week from now or 2 weeks from now, they're going to reference it. Yeah, we had that meeting with Matt, and I remember he said in this particular trait, consumers were acting this way and the adjacencies really could be changed. They're going to remember that. And they're going to remember that Matt gave them that nugget. So important to give the gifted data. And, we joke about it, Matt, especially in Walmart world that we live in, that there's only two things that really you can give a Walmart buyer they don't have to pay for. One is, data, and the other gift of time. So finishing 2 minutes early on a call is fantastic. It's a 30-minute call, finish at minute 28. And the second thing is giving them data and insights. And you can't beat that. Now, obviously, it could be broad, right? It could be category sales data, it could be your consumer data, financial data, all kinds of things like that. And so we come alongside and really help that supplier play at a different level, because you don't have to have massive agencies and multi hundreds of thousands of dollars of budget to be able to come in with the right insight for the trait, insight for the category, insight for the group of stores, and we help people play up and deliver that. So that part is so important, but I think oftentimes just underrepresented and really kind of discarded at time.
We just got a question in from our friend Mike Bach. Mike, I'm so glad that you're here. We're going to hold the questions to the end, but it is a great reminder to me, and forgive me for not doing this at the beginning. we call this Conversations on Retail because we want there to be dialogue between the presenters and their participants. So if you've got questions for Rick about this or about the Plum Marketplace, which is, like I said, incredibly exciting, use the Q&A and go ahead and submit those questions now, and we'll get to all of those at the end. So again, Mike, thank you so much. Rick, every one of us, I think, have a tendency of going into a meeting with an idea of what we need in order to walk away feeling like we have won. But give us a different perspective on what winning looks like in these meetings.
Yeah, listen, I know we're all under pressure, Matt. I mean, everyone's under pressure to deliver this quarter, this day. But if we've learned anything over our careers, it is about playing the long game. Now, the long game, again, measure whether it's months or years, when is the long game's important. So the buyer meeting isn't necessarily about winning and losing that day. It really, we just want people to think that someone has to lose in this. Again, you're going to leave, so, oh my gosh, I didn't get what I want, therefore I lost. But you got to be looking at what a win looks like. And even if you gave them information and you're able to make that buyer smarter and understand X, and you didn't get exactly what you're looking for, we know that over time, you will get on the list to get the phone call. Over time, you will have the right product coming in, because we all know that good products make it, bad products don't. We're all fighting for the tie. If you've got an amazing product at an amazing price and it's killing it, Walmart's chasing you. This isn't the conversation we're having right now, okay? And if your product sucks and it's going downhill and no one's buying it, we're not going to fix that either. But most careers, most P&Ls, most big wins happen in the middle. And in that middle gray area of, do I win, do I lose, and who wins the ties? I used to have to make a decision, back in my son's baseball days when he was 9, 10 years old. Do you pick the kid or do you pick the parent? You recruit the parent, Matt. I mean, you're going because that's going to help the team, and you can train the kid and bring him along. I think that analogy bodes well here, is that if I've got a great supplier with a good product and they're delivering for me, and I know they're going to work for me, and the product is good to almost great, I would lean in, give them my perspective on can make the product great, and they win the tie all day long. But they win that tie because of the relationship and how they're engaging here. So I think it's just really important, from that perspective, to make sure that it's not this win-lose, it's that long game. Now, let's not be naive, Matt. We know that from a practical standpoint, I have to hit a number, and I get hitting the number. But we also know where you're going to that call. You already know in your mind, is this a no-brainer, I just can't screw it up, or there's no way I'm going to win, I just have to go through the motions. But when you're in that point where you're almost at the tipping point, all things are equal. Velocity, I'm feeling pretty good. I want to work with the best supplier that has the comparable product versus the person that says, well, I'll just flip a coin. No one's flipping a coin. You win ties based on that 20, 30, 45-minute engagement from the buyer, because they want to work with you, Matt. And that's why people hire people like us. And that's why they hire people to be the right type of account executive, because they know you're going to be a difference maker in that meeting.
I've been in so many buyer meetings where I've seen a supplier show up with 50 slides and they're just going a mile a minute trying to get through them, and they never do. They're never allowed to get through them. Give us some advice on presentation style and what that looks like.
Yeah, I could argue it's dependent on the age of your buyer. It depends on, again, what you're trying to deliver. If I have my boss in the room, do I have to go through the slides because they presented them? End of the day, we all know simple is better. I've been in buyer calls before where the deck is there and the guy smiled at me and said, okay, let's just humor each other. They literally went to the last page and said, okay, let's start here. Now, we could argue that's a little bit rude and kind of awkward, but I get it. And so I think that 50 slide presentation, the craziest thing is in front of them. I would rather get to the content quickly and give myself in that just a 30-minute meeting. Let's stay with that analogy, Matt. If I could knock the pleasantries out in 1 or 2, get 5-10 minutes of data in there, and it gave me another 15 at the back end to have Q&A, the last thing you want to do is to be at minute 25, you're pushing, somebody's out on the other side of the door, your buyer's trying to leave, and now you're at the point where you're trying to differentiate yourself. We've all been there. It is awkward at best, and it's bad. It's just not a good place to be in. So simple is better. If we can't do that, shame on us. Again, coming from P&G, you might argue that some folks are going to roll their eyes at the Proctor conversation, but I grew up with the one-page memo. Now, you may have had 50 pages of attachments as bag sheets because people needed them. But as a good Proctor person going and selling, I had a small proposal, really upfront, exactly what I needed. And when I had questions, I could pull bag sheets up. I think that's a classic mistake that people make. I think the second thing is we don't allow time to ask the buyer if they have questions and allow us to answer them. And we normally wait until the end to get that. And the buyer says, great, this is all good. Matt, look forward to talking to you next time. In the meantime, here are my 4 questions. You're like, and you're kind of reaching for that chance to answer those questions. Very few people are going to walk into this big meeting where they've got an hour or 2 to have conversations. Those days are just not in front of us for the majority of the supplier community. So you got to be focused on that.
We talked earlier about, going into meetings, kind of focusing on your own needs, what you need to get from it. But talk about the relationship between buyer and seller and the importance of really understanding what they need as well.
The analogy we used to use back in the day, like literally just a few years ago back, it still holds true today. Old buyers never die. They just go to a new category. Well, guess what? Old salespeople, they don't die. They just go to a new category. So we all know that if you're in this business long enough, that buyer's going to come back and they're going to roll their eyes and like, oh crap, I've got Matt again. It's like, really? Or they're like, hey, great. I'm in a new category. I know nothing about it. I trust Matt. So even though he's not the biggest person in the category, because I worked with him over here, I'm going to bring Matt into a conversation. It's going to help out. So all things being equal, that trust and empathy thing is so, so important because they're going to trust you. You've got a track record. So that's really important because it's the long game, Matt. It's the earlier question. I'm not talking about a 1-year career here. I'm looking at people that call on retailers for a period of time. The reason they're so successful, not because they get favors, not because they're the favored child. This isn't a teacher's pet. They get favoritism because they deliver, they're trustworthy, and they're going to make sure that happens. So that's number one. I think the other aspect of it is that we're all people and relationships matter. And listen, Walmart, Target, Kroger, these are all global companies now. It's not like everyone came from, 2 miles away from headquarters. People like to do business with someone they like, and someone they like isn't because that came from the same area. They like them because of that trust and empathy thing. And I think that's important for our personal relationships, Matt. The reason someone wants to have coffee with you and they have coffee again, but I think that the buyer and supplier relationship is so true. And so part of it is we all want to put ourselves in their shoes. And if you've ever met someone that's a supplier today that used to be a buyer, or just the opposite, used to be a supplier, now they're a buyer, they'll tell you, understanding the pressure the other person is in is really, really important. So we have to understand that these buyers are under tremendous pressure we probably don't understand. We have to understand kind of what they like and dislike, right? And we got to speak their language. But if we are truly sincere, inquisitive in what we do, I think we'll put ourselves in a good position. And just like we have personal relationships, Matt, if you and I were talking right now, am I doing what is required? Yes. But more importantly, do I allow that conversation to bring the buyer in so that they feel like they're being listened to? Am I really truly to seek to understand? It's the old, Stephen Covey thing, seek first to understand. Am I really doing that? And so I'll take this conversation back to really how I started this webinar, Matt, is that there's nothing new under the sun. All this stuff is intuitive. Now, what's changed is the form, whether it's Zoom or no amount of time or how things play out. But these are just tried and true things that over time will make a difference in your career and really the success of the products that you're.
So one of the fastest ways to develop a great relationship with your buyer is to come in not with a product mindset, but a category mindset. Yeah. Describe briefly what that means.
Yeah, I can remember that the first time that I truly understand this, I was in Bangkok. I was calling on Macro, and we're selling in, and this guy said, "Do you really understand what I'm doing here?" And I just kind of like, "Yeah." And he's like, "No, do you really understand, Rick?" And he's like, I work for a multinational global company, but my category and my desk is like a small business. I've got my own P&L. I've got people that work for me. I can, if my business grows, I get more resources. If my business goes down, I get less resources. I'm either profitable or I'm not. And it just kind of clicked. I'm like, oh, okay. He said, so I don't get extra support and get subsidized if I suck at what I do. You know, just like in a small business, you don't get extra resources from banks or investors if your product's not good. And that was kind of the first time is like, it really is a small business within the category just versus this transactional thing. So that's pretty cool. And then even as you look at category sales profit margins, we've all talked about that, you know, average margin, how things are average, you know, and how you kind of play into that and penny profit versus the actual percentages. All that is important because as the buyer's looking at that category and they're trading things in and out, end of the day, they want new incremental dollars and new incremental shoppers, and they want to grow their pie. They don't want to trade things in the pie, which is how small business works. Hey, this is great, but I've got 4 new products and I just move your sales from one to the other. No, I want you to buy 2 things from Plum when you shop, not 1, because you love getting our audit services. You said, gosh, Rick, I'm truly trying to understand, you know, consumer insights, but I'd love for you to do some ratings and reviews for me. Well, that's fantastic because that same engagement, that same buyer for me is coming in and is buying 3 things versus 1. And so that small business thing was really pretty cool. And I think the bottom piece is that, listen, we're all in it to make sure that our products get in and we're taking care of things. But if you can link in your product and how it helps the category grow and the actual entire pie grows, that's a real hard thing to say no to. And if you get back to my comment about ties, you're going to win a lot of ties if you provide an opportunity. Forget about margin and profit, but if you can grow that category and make that thing move, that's a really, really big idea for a buyer.
2 more of my own questions quickly, and then we'll jump into some great questions that have come in already. So one of the ways that the game has changed fairly significantly is that it used to be that a buyer, in most cases, only had responsibility for what was taking place inside the 4 walls of the store. Talk about the importance of the e-commerce conversation as part of these meetings now.
You know, man, I would even argue as little as, well, let's say pre-COVID, not 10 years ago, but just little as 3 years ago, this was still a, yeah, necessary evil. Yeah, we're going to make this work. But if you look at the work that Tom Ward is doing and that whole organization, the OPD, I mean, the online, the pickup delivery aspect of things, that is so integrated today and what a buyer is looking at and how they're rewarded, that it's been a game changer. Now, did COVID drive that? Did the pickup and delivery chain, you know, have that? But there's not an industry newsletter or magazine or a blog post you pick up today that wouldn't be talking about, you know, Amazon needing more hubs because they can't do everything out of their warehouse, and a competitive disadvantage is because Walmart has, you know, these close to 5,000 stores, and those are many, you know, hub and spoke, and that's all important. And so they're picking inventory from the shelf, and that impacts things. So getting back to that comment I made about a small business, if you're a buyer and you've got this category in front of you and you're having to manage things, you have to actually manage the e-commerce piece of it as well, because that impacts your forecast, that impacts the dollars you have in inventory, it impacts your sales off the side counter, because if pickup gets it and there's nothing on the side counter, it looks terrible. I mean, so it's dramatically changed. And so I think you're going to continue to find buyers have more of a small business hat than they did before. So omni-channel is really, really important. I think the other aspect of it is, again, you have to win on the side counter. I don't think that's going to change, Matt, for a long time. But the number of people, especially for higher ticketed items, that are shopping, and we all know this intuitively because we do it. You're in a store and you're getting ready to make a decision on TV. You walk into Walmart today, there's all these TVs that are out there. The first thing you do is pull up your phone and you go look at ratings and reviews. TV A has 0, TV B has 50, the next one has 250. Ratings are, you know, whatever the stars are, it looks fantastic. You're making that decision, you buy in a store. So even within brick and mortar, the online ratings and review is no longer kind of a nice to have. the mobile technology and access has really made it a must-have. Now, we all know intuitively that if I was just selling online, you have to have amazing ratings and reviews. And even if I was buying that same TV online, the photography matters. And we help a ton of people with aisle 9 and the photography we do to bringing that up to best in class. But if I'm in the store, I'm already looking at the TV and I see it live, but ratings and review are still important. So if I was looking at 2 ways of delivering to make sure that your buyer knew that you were serious about e-commerce, is that you need to be a solid A-, B+ minimum on just your content, your photography. So even prior to a buyer meeting, the buyer pulls up your URL, they look at what's going on Walmart.com, they're going to know whether you're serious or not. Just like if you're interviewing someone and their LinkedIn page sucks, it just tells you something. And so I think it is an important piece to have amazing photography, content, and they're going to look at the ratings and reviews and say, how much do you even care? There's like 2 reviews on this. Do you really care? And you're like, oh, no, that's my buddy over here. That's not my department. I'm the salesperson selling to you. And I think the buyer is going to wave that off and said, you're naive. If you're not serious about my business enough to have an amazing online presence, then how do I know you're going to take care of on-shelf availability, to make sure that tags are right, to make sure your product is quality on my shelf? We would have gotten a pass 5 years ago. I don't think you're going to get a pass anymore. And so quality photography, quality ratings and reviews are as important as ever for brick and mortar, just as it's always been for e-commerce. And again, with the shameless plug for us, listen, we're a Walmart approved rating review company. Would love to come alongside and help solve that for you. And we do it, more than a decent job of taking care of photography. But those are 2 things that I would drive all day long.
Yeah, great stuff. My friend Jeff Griffin taught me more than 22 years ago to go into meetings always thinking in terms of the what, the so what, and the now what. Yeah. So you've pitched the what and you've delivered the data to answer the so what. So now talk about the wrap up, how to have a strong end game after you've gone through this great presentation, had this great conversation. How do you manage the now what?
Yeah, we're all people as well. And I think being a student of your buyer is important. If I've learned anything over the years, it's that you've got a decision maker and you've got an influencer and an implementer. And most buyers are, they kind of hover between that influencer decision maker, but we all know that DMMs and others are big time decision makers. So for me, I'm always trying to understand, hey, in your role today, where's the pressure coming from? How can I help you be successful? And that's normally a buyer kind of like, well, I'm not going to tell you that, or what do you mean? But if I have the trust and empathy card going, well, Matt, let me tell you, here's the deal. I'm just getting tremendous pressure on penny profit over here. And I'm just not sure how this will work. Or this particular trait in these 200 stores, my DMM visited, he's like, how can we not win in college stores? And Rick, if you could help me figure that out, getting the answer to that question just made you relevant. Now you got to be careful, Matt, because now you got to deliver on it. But I think that's so important to be able to understand that while they are decision makers, they're decision makers above them that are coming down. So that's number one. I think the other thing is, and we used to joke about this, is that the last thing you want to do is to be 364 days early. You can't miss timelines. If you are making the sophomore mistake, it's like, oh, well, I thought you were making the decision next week. And the buyer's like, no, we made that decision 2 weeks ago. Didn't you get that email or didn't you get that notice? Shame on you. If you're a reconnaissance, whether it be through a replenishment manager, your category captain over here that understands that timings change here and there as they're making decisions. So being on your buyer's timeline, man, you don't need to be 11 and a half months early. Really, really bad. And then I'm going to go back to my Proctor days again. Man, there is nothing better than a 2 or 3 bullet point follow-up email. It's going to help you when you get a deduction. And you know what? You're all going to get deductions. You just will. But that follow-up email of 2 or 3 next steps sent to your buyer as a recap, that is not a nuance. That is as an imperative. And it has saved my rear so many times, not only to clarify what we're trying to do, but when you get that $100,000, $200,000 deduction 3 years later, and you pull up that email that articulates exactly what you're talking about, it is a game saver. So those are kind of the three big things that I would use from a follow-on standpoint.
All right, great stuff, Rick. We've got a handful of really good questions that I want to try to get to really, really quickly. So first one is a question about small versus large. What if you're a small company, what latitude do Walmart buyers grant you versus larger suppliers that make consumer insights part of their core proposition? And I guess this probably speaks a little bit to what you and your team are doing to sort of level the playing field, even for these smaller suppliers, in the ability to bring insights. But I'll let you answer the question.
You know, Mac, people come to us all the time just that saying, I can't play against Unilever, J&J, SC Johnson, P&G. These guys just own this massive, massive insight pool, and they're driving these big decisions. And so we get people coming in, and my coaching to them is, all right, Unilever's doing X, SC Johnson's doing Y. What is the trait that you could uniquely play in and deliver insights that of a 10-point PowerPoint deck of these points, it's like point number 9 on their deck and no one cares about. And you're coming in saying, let me take point number 9, which is really important because it's, seasonal X, again, like in a college, trade or whatever it may be. And to be the hero and the expert there, that allows a small supplier to play up here, because you're not going to spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the syndicated data that you need. And I don't think you have to, because you're naive to think you're going to win there anyway, because it's just the machine's way too big. But there are nuances that come into play. Side counter work, again, engagement with consumers around seasonality. And you could be the cold flu expert. You're like, well, wait a minute, there's massive cold flu reports. Everyone has that. You're like, oh, that's right. Huh. Well, maybe from a seasonality standpoint, I really could be that person that works on seasonality A or B, and I could win there. So I think that's how a smaller person plays. It's the same quality. It's the same insights rigors that we imply. And listen, when I give you a report, it's going to be statistically relevant, all the good stuff. And guess what? The Unilevers, P&Gs of the world, they use us as well. The buyer knows, and it's valid data coming from it, but it's a unique subset, not a, hey, Matt, thank you, but I already have that data. So small can be very strategic and scrappy, but still deliver the high quality. And you can get that through our Plum Marketplace.
Yeah, you addressed this partially earlier, but a great question from George. You mentioned bringing data and insights to the buyer is important. Would that include insights around the online products page experience in the form of how good is my product or supplier content versus the rest of the category? Examples being good titles, enough images, product attributes, etc.
Yeah, we've got a great product coming out in the next couple of weeks that's going to automate that for you. So it's almost like, George, thank you for the softball throw to me. But we've got a partner today that we work with. It's Wabata, Gabe White, Gabe. And just being able to go in and run through a scorecard to really let you know the ranking you have for reviews, length of review, content, photos. There's a scorecard set up, and you can basically be scraped, if you will, and pull that information to give you a score. And then we can help you change that from a, content, photography, et cetera, area. And we can let you know how you rank along those lines. So that's a product we have coming. We can manually do it today. So I would love to have that phone call, George, coming our way, because I think not only can we help you do better, we can help you put things in place to help you be better consistently over time.
A question, basically wanting some ideas around buyer scorecard. What can you say about buyer scorecard in terms of the metrics that they're looking at on a day in and day out basis, and how you as a supplier can help them, manage that or optimize that?
Yeah. So you think, if you think about their own scorecard, and again, it gets back to, we intuitively know, because you all have enough friends that are buyers to say, here's what's on my scorecard. The question is, are you ever going to know what the real data is? I mean, are they really going to tell you exactly where their number is? And I would say, man, if you have the right kind of relationship, maybe, but we know intuitively that our supplier scorecards really are a subset of that. And blocking and tackling says, if the buyer has a scorecard rated on OTIF or rated on shelf availability, you could talk about 2 or 3 other cool things, but at a minimum, I'm going to make sure I'm nailing those basics because I know that's on their scorecard without even knowing their number. And I know it's an issue today. But I think the unique piece is, which gets back into, is your buyer on the DMM track? Are they a long-term buyer over here? And they want to go drive to the next category. What are they trying to solve for? What is their DMM interested in, which is our earlier conversation, Matt, so that it may not be necessarily on the scorecard, but it could be a pet project, or it could be something they're trying to understand. That kind of relationship gets you out of the, hey, talk to me twice a year. Because now they're saying, hey, I'm going to be in stores in San Antonio. Why don't you meet me down there and we're going to talk about this project I have. I think those are the pieces that, especially as a small supplier, you can win that game. You can win it all day long because they need someone that's going to give them the right kind of attention to be able to go drive things. Again, I'm not calling on people today. And you may say, oh, Rick, didn't you know that every buyer gives me their scorecard and I see their data? I'd be surprised if that's the case. But I know with that empathetic engagement and trust that we can get some pretty good numbers and be able to help them.
Last question is a great question, but kind of a long question. I'm gonna try to boil it down. So it's really talking about retail coverage and how some buyers would see this as an unnecessary expense and others see retail coverage as being critical to driving top line and comp sales. And so what it asks specifically is, forgetting for a moment the bias that you might have because you know so much about this space, and knowing that every category is different, how would you propose working around this, what they call a delicate topic? And maybe it's a question more of, is there sort of commonality now, or is there a difference of opinion that's going to vary greatly from buyer to buyer?
I think it's going to vary a little bit, buyer to buyer. And listen, we could look at the PSPs again. That goes back to the expert. But if I knew nothing, and this is Mike. So Mike, if I knew nothing coming into this, I would look at it and say, statistically for me, which is selfishly the spot that we play at times, listen, I'd love to go audit 4,000 or 2,500 stores for you. But I think statistically, because I'm a math guy, everything happens in bell curves. It's all stats, Matt. I mean, Mike, that's where my world comes in. Statistically, I would make sure that I'm always spot checking to make sure that when my bell curve of life, that the stores that are important to me, that the shelf and my world looks good, and that the normal coverage and things that Walmart should be doing with their engagement at PSPs are looking where it needs to be. I'm not talking about the 50 store outliers, the ones that are terrible. You know what? Good luck getting coverage there anyway. Unless you use someone like us, it's going to be tough. But the point being, I would make sure that I'm never the cause of, hey, they were going to look at the shelves and for whatever reason, my products were the ones, the tags were down and the facings were terrible. You never want to be that person. So as long as I'm spot checking and my core stores are where they need to be, I wouldn't worry too much about the world of retail coverage. That being said, the big are going to take care of the big, and they're going to take care of their own. And if I'm looking at a shelf with a lot of SKUs on it and the whole shelf looks good except for me and 5 other small suppliers, it became a big priority for me. So that's number one, kind of how I would go look at this. I think the other thing from an expense standpoint, we all know the stores we have to win in, okay, because it's the volume stores that are coming in. And we also know that there are seasons we have to win. And if I was trying to look at budget and where I am, I'm not doing anything 12 months out of the year. I probably can't afford 12 months out of the year. But I know when my buyer meeting is, I know when my spends are coming. I know when the ratings are coming in. I know when my season's coming in. So shame on me if I'm not winning during that time frame. And that's probably where I would put my money.
Great stuff. Rick, again, thank you so much for doing this. And I know, we've talked a lot about Plum Shop, and again, from my own perspective, being on the outside of it, it really is a game-changing capability, the way you've been able to curate these services and give suppliers not only the ability to find a lot of things in one place, but to move a whole lot faster. The one thing I want to call special attention to, and it's only because I've kind of recently discovered this myself, but if you go to plumshop.com and then click on blog, there is a lot of really, really great content that you all have developed that talks about everything about, being successful around back to school and 7 reasons why your products aren't selling. I mean, this is really, really great content that even if you never purchased a single service, I think it would be really, really worth your while to check the site out. So Rick, any parting words before we say so long and get back to our workday?
Yeah, the folks that are still hanging on here, so thanks for hanging on. Okay, hanging in to listen to this live. In our world, I'm the equivalent of a supplier coming in, talking to this webinar as my buyers. And you know that I've got a product to sell. It's Plum Shop, it's Field Agent, it's ratings, reviews, etc. Shame on me if I don't take the chance, Matt, to put my dollars and resources into blog material, education, and webinars to give back. Because what I'm counting on, Matt, and this is my shameless plug again, we're down to 14 now. Hold on. I went back up again. We're good. The important part here is that if I've done my job right today, the people listening should understand that we truly do care about suppliers being successful and solving their problems. And I'm going to shamelessly say that we've got the best quality and the best products out there, and the easiest, the least friction way in the world to make that happen. But if the only thing you get from this is us helping out, that's why we're driving the blog and other things. So shop on the marketplace, check it out, DM me on LinkedIn, would love to help out. But again, we want to make people successful in the retail community. So hopefully we've helped a little bit today.
Yeah, very good. And we will push the heck out of this video because it's such an important story to tell. Yeah. So Rick West, co-founder and CEO of Field Agent, fieldagent.net. Also one of the folks that have brought to life this amazing new plumshop.com. So check them both out. Rick, thank you so much. Hope everyone has a great day. We'll see you again soon.
Man, as always, appreciate it, man. See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.